Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the 20th century's most influential and definitely most controversial spiritual texts, Aleister Crowley's The Book of the Law. This is a work that really tried to turn everything people thought they knew about freedom, morality, and even God completely on its head.
So how are we going to tackle this pretty dense book? Well, we're going to follow its own logic. We'll start with the problem it sees in the world, this idea that humanity is shackled by old thinking. Then we'll get into its solution, a new cosmic trinity, the core law of true will, and this really powerful idea that every single person is a star. And finally, we'll look at its radical vision for society and ask the big question, what's the real price of this kind of total freedom?
Now, you've probably heard this line before. It is, without a doubt, the book's most famous and, most misunderstood statement. Do what thou wilt is the absolute heart of this philosophy. So our goal today is to really dig in and unpack what it actually means. And as you're about to see, it's a whole lot more complicated than it sounds.
Okay, so right out of the gate, the Book of the Law basically declares war on the past. It argues that the world's major religions, which are built on ideas like sin, guilt, and some kind of external authority telling you what to do, are the fundamental problem. From its perspective, these are just systems of restriction, and they're designed to hold humanity back.
So where does a book like this even come from? Well, its claim to authority rests on a really wild origin story. We're in Cairo, 1904. Aleister Crowley says that for 1 hour a day for 3 days straight, a voice, a disembodied voice calling itself Awas, dictated the entire text to him. So this wasn't something he claimed to have written himself. The claim is that it was a direct divine message, a new holy book for a new age for all of humankind.
But here's the twist in the story, and it's a big one. Crowley himself claimed he hated what he was writing down. This quote right here gets at that conflict. He said the ideas felt totally alien to him, even hostile to his own beliefs. He claimed his hand was being moved against his will. And that became a key piece of the argument, right? The idea was, look, if I didn't even want to write this, it couldn't have possibly come from me. It had to come from somewhere else.
Okay, so if the old religions and their gods are the problem, what's the solution? You might think it's atheism, but nope. The book offers a completely new divine framework. It lays out a brand new cosmology, built around a trinity of cosmic forces.
At the core of all this is a duality. On one hand, you have Nuit. Think of her as infinite space, the sum total of everything that could possibly exist or happen. She's all potential. And on the other hand, you have Hadit. He's the infinitely small point of consciousness, that unique spark of awareness that's inside every single one of us. So, Nuit is the boundless universe of what can be, and Hadit is the individual point of view that gets to experience it.
And when you bring those two together, infinite potential and individual consciousness, they give birth to the third figure in this trinity, Ra-Hor Kui, the crowned and conquering child. He represents the world we actually live in, the tangible, active result of that cosmic dance, and he's described as the fierce, powerful god of this new age of force and fire.
So, if you've got this brand new vision of the universe, you're going to need a new moral code to go with it. The old rules, right and wrong, sin and virtue, are all declared obsolete, thrown out, and in their place, there's just one single, all-encompassing commandment.
And this whole philosophy gets a name, thelema. It comes from the Greek word for will. And that's not just a random name choice. The concept of will is the absolute dead center of this entire system. It's seen as the core dynamic nature of every single person.
And here's that new morality in a nutshell. The highest possible good, the very formula for freedom, is do what thou wilt. So, what's the only sin? It's not pride, it's not greed, it's not any of the usual suspects. The only word of sin is restriction. The book's argument is that all sadness, all failure, all sorrow, it all comes from just one source. Any force, internal or external, that stops you from walking your true path.
Now, this right here is the most critical distinction to get. Do what thou wilt absolutely does not mean do whatever you feel like in the moment. Thelema draws a very sharp line between a passing whim and what it calls your true will. Think of your true will as your unique purpose, your essential nature, almost like a planet's orbit. The real goal isn't just mindless pleasure, it's the much harder job of figuring out what your orbit is, and then following it perfectly without interference.
And that idea of a unique orbit for every single person, well, it leads us to the book's most powerful and probably most famous metaphor for what it means to be an individual. This one line changes everything. In the old systems that the book is railing against, maybe you're a sinner, or you're a servant, or just a flawed creature that needs saving. But in Thelema, every man and every woman is a star. You're not like a star, you are one, a sovereign, self-contained divine being with your own light.
So if you think of yourself as a star, it totally reframes how you see your life. It means your life path, your true will, is your own unique orbit through the cosmos. Sure, other stars, other people, they're going to exert some influence on you, kind of like gravity, and that's okay. But a collision, or anything that knocks you off your unique path, that's the ultimate mistake. This metaphor is the whole foundation for absolute individual rights. So if you follow that logic to its natural conclusion, what happens? Well, a lot of society's most basic structures get put right in the crosshairs. If the one and only sin is restriction, then any institution that tries to force a single code of behavior on everybody is, by definition, a source of that sin.
And yeah, this philosophy was bound to clash with social norms. The commentaries on the book, for example, they slam traditional marriage, seeing it as a kind of property law that restricts the will. And we really have to confront the fact that Crowley's own writings contain some pretty harsh and misogynistic statements that definitely reflect his time. Like this incredibly problematic line from his commentary where he just states, "We say that woman has no soul."
And this is where context and modern interpretation become absolutely essential. As this later editor's note points out, a lot of followers of Thelema today argue that Crowley's views were really just a product of his Victorian upbringing. They suggest that what he crudely tied to biological sex is better understood as universal principles, active and passive ways of being that exist in everybody. It's really an attempt to separate the core philosophy from the flawed person who first wrote it down.
All right, so let's bring all of this together and get to the final, really challenging takeaway. If every person is a star, and the only sin is restriction, what does that actually mean for us, for society, and for the idea of freedom itself?
This right here is basically the charter of Thelema. It's a vision for a world built on absolute personal liberty. The only real bond between people should be love under will. In other words, a connection you choose, not one you're forced into. It's a radical demand for total self-responsibility. It means rejecting any outside authority, whether it's a god or a government, that tries to tell you how to live your life.
And that brings us to the end, you know? The Book of the Law doesn't just hand out easy answers. It leaves us with this huge, provocative question. By defining sin as restriction, it forces you to grapple with your own ideas about freedom, morality, and purpose. What does true, absolute, unbridled liberty really look like for you and for a society? That's the challenge it leaves echoing.